Jazz is a teacher and a mindful leadership facilitator from Ottawa who works with organizations and individuals working towards self empowerment. Her philosophy is simple: slow down to level up. She takes an holistic approach to movement and meditation and offers a unique perspective on connecting to community through introspection. Hello, hello, Jazz. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to have you on. Um, and you said yes to be on my podcast, so I'm super excited.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this all week, and
Yeah,
I have a feeling this is going to be a lot of fun for one thing, but it's also going to be a learning experience for both of us, I think. So,
that's it. Yeah, I think so. And same thing with people who are listening. If they're trying to, get somewhere or getting a little bit more understanding of, what you do and what I do, and it's seeing the perspective, seeing the whole picture of, what can I take from this and learn and maybe apply into my own life. So I think it's absolutely amazing.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, Jazz, could you first tell me a little bit about yourself and how did you first become interested in the yoga and meditation?
Oh, of course. So, I've been practicing yoga and meditation or some form of it for, gosh, over 20 years now. It's been a real key part of just how I've self-regulated. It's been a key part of the culture growing up, in the family that I've grown up in. And the funny thing is that it wasn't actually called yoga growing up, right? So there's always an element of meditation, of movement. These were things that were highly prioritized, but it was also not something that was forced, which was really nice. And I think having that background and having the concepts of yoga and meditation brought into my life that way are what have allowed me um, to bring it to other people in the same way. And so like I said, I've been practicing for over 20 years at this point. I've only been teaching for about 8. And I got interested in teaching yoga and meditation to others because of the world that we live in right now. And what I started to notice was just the number of people around me that were burning out and not realizing that they were burning out. And of course, we know this is something that is multi-layered. It's multifaceted as well. Um, but there are some key fundamental things that we can do and some awareness that we need to have in order to actually fix the problem or resolve the issue from its root. And I know you know a lot about that already too.
Yeah, I didn't start meditating 20 years ago. I think this is something new for me. I'd say between 4 years, maybe 5 years, going on the 5 year now. Um, and yeah, um, I make it more of it's my time. And this is what mommy needs. This is what I need. I need my space because I find myself, as you said, when I hit and I recognize my own anxiety, for example, or I find my own, my body is just jiggling kind of a little bit, and we're like, okay,
Yeah.
breath, breathe, right?
Yeah,
And then I go in and I meditate and I calm myself down, calm the nervous system down.
that's it.
Really, really helps. Really helps. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's the part that I think most people are starting to realize now. It wasn't
Mhm.
really the trend way back, 15, 20 years ago, or even like 10 years ago. It was very much yoga as a workout, right? So you have a lot of like hot yoga studios, and I think it's great, but it's also understanding that it's not meant to be just a workout. Or if that's what it's
Mhm.
supposed to be for you, and that's the intention behind why you're moving the way that you're moving, awesome. But you need something to balance that out as well, right? The whole point of a yoga practice is movement with intention. And it shows us that we don't have to go hard all the time. It's a space that allows us to be soft sometimes too. It's a place that allows us to really explore what our nervous system needs and wants and where it is in that at any given moment, really. Um, and I think one of the most common misconceptions about yoga is that it's just a physical practice. And what I mean by that is even though we pay it a lip service by saying, well, it's so much more than that, I honestly don't think that a lot of people, most of the people that I've come into contact with who are new to yoga, really understand what that means, right? There's the element of, the breath work, of course, there's the meditation, of course, and then there's the physical practice, of course. But there's so much more to it past that. And what I mean by that is it's how you carry yourself. It's the ethics by which you live your life. And when we start to delve into those and we start to delve a little bit more into yoga philosophy and we start to delve into the lifestyle and what that actually means in terms of applying those ethics, that's where people start to open their eyes wide and be like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And when we start to talk about those applications in their life, like looking at where we are now and examining some of these philosophies, these ethics, these principles, when we start to question ourselves in terms of how am I applying this principle to my life now, it really does open up an entire other world of possibility. And it forces us to take a step back and be like, a lot of this was done really unconsciously. And when we start to bring into our awareness and our consciousness all of these things that we've been running in the background, we start to realize, oh crap, maybe this is why I'm so anxious or I'm burnt out all the time. The analogy that I like to use is, when you have if you have an old laptop, for example, or an old computer, and you've got like a million tabs open and you've got a whole bunch of programs running, and you're one of those people that doesn't want to close anything because you never know, I might need that just in case. And then, you open it up the next day and you're adding more to it. I know, I can relate. You're right, and you're adding to it the next day, and you just shut it down, or like you close
Until it
it.
crashes and it goes boom. Yes.
Exactly, right? You have all of this, but what happens before it completely crashes is that it's going to slow down, right? It's going to slow down. Things are going to take a little longer to buffer. It's not as
Right.
clear.
So don't pay attention to
There you
these
go.
signals that
Yeah,
it's like, hey, something's happening. Pay
that's right.
attention to me. Do something about it.
That's right. And then what happens, like you said, it crashes. And we're starting back from the beginning. And,
Right.
it's the analogy to life because oftentimes when we take the time just to reset, shut down and reset, we tend to work just fine, right?
Right.
Unplug, disconnect to reconnect. I'm a really big fan of that. When we do that, oftentimes it's just the reboot that our nervous system needs, that we need just to get this fresh perspective on what's going on right in front of us, all around us.
Mm.
So
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you.
yeah,
It's like the universe, throwing these things at us and be like, hey, haven't you learned already? So
exactly,
it's like it keeps on, you know, um, crashing that system so many times until you're like, okay, enough is enough. I have to do something about it. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Beautiful. Oh, I so agree with you on this one. Yes. So can you share any specific techniques or practices that the listeners can try at home or incorporating, for example, some of the yoga or meditation into their daily lives?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so many that like there's tons of videos out there, and I think that's great. But my favorite one is just keeping it really, really simple. Pay attention to how you're breathing. So if you want to really just give yourself a quick little reset in the middle of the day, you can even set a timer for like 2 minutes, 2, 3, 5 minutes, whatever you have. And literally all you need to do is sit or you can stand, but be still. Be still wherever you are, and then start to focus on where the breath is hitting your nostrils. So like that little space just above your lip. When you take a breath in, pay attention to that sensation there. Breathe as deeply as you can. Maybe you count to 5, maybe you count to 7. Hold it for 1 second. And then as you exhale, exhale really slow. Exhaling through your belly first, then your chest, your upper chest, and then back out through your nose. And feel the breath escaping your body. Do that in and out. That's all you need to do. Set your timer for like the 2, 3, 5 minutes, whatever it is. And that's all you need to focus on. And I guarantee you, at the end of that time, when that timer goes off, you're going to be ready to take on whatever comes next. and you're going to be feeling a lot more clear-headed as you move into the next chapter of whatever it is you're doing. Breathe. Most
Yeah.
of us breathe incorrectly. So the
Yeah.
question that I like to ask is, okay, when you take a breath, especially for women, and this is something that I just can't unsee now that it's been pointed out. So as women, we're often told that we need to hold everything in, right? Like we need to suck it in. You want to be as small, as skinny as possible, right? So we're accustomed to sucking in our stomach. We're accustomed to, just tensing everything all the time. So even when we take a breath, that's what we're still doing. We're not allowing ourselves to fully take a breath. So my
Mhm.
challenge to especially the women out there, and guys can do this too, but my challenge to you is when you take a breath, let your belly just completely relax. Allow yourself to be big. Allow yourself to
Mm.
take up space. Relax the muscles in your stomach. When you take that breath in, allow yourself to expand like a balloon. Okay. And then when you exhale, allow yourself to feel it completely deflate. Okay. Pay
Mm.
attention to what that's doing to your body, because I can guarantee you, now that you know, now that you've heard this, the next person that you pay attention to, when they're breathing, you're going to pick up on, oh, they're really sucking in their stomach. Because that's what we've been taught to
Mm.
do, right? We've like from a
Yeah.
very young age, it's suck it in, shoulders back, you know, your posture is really important, but nobody's actually taught us to breathe, because apparently this is something that we've been doing since we were little kids.
Yeah.
We should
You're
know how to
right.
breathe,
You're
right?
very right. My mother used to do that all the time.
Yeah.
And I know it because it was the same thing. Always stay strict, always
Yep.
suck in your belly. And it was short breaths, short breaths. So, I mean, I grew up with that. So I know because through the years, it was the same thing with me until I had my first child. And they were teaching me actually how to breathe through my labor because it was, you need to breathe.
Yes.
Because if you don't
Yes.
breathe, you're going to suffocate. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And it's just this fundamental thing that we do every single day. We have done this from the day that we were born.
Mhm.
Um, and now all of a sudden it feels like this novelty, right? To actually take a deep breath just because we haven't been able to do so for so long. It's almost
Yeah.
like we're waiting for something, right? And that just even the thought, even saying that, your shoulders start to creep up. There's a
Yeah.
tightness in your chest. But the second you're just like, you let your shoulders
Relax.
fall,
Everything goes.
everything
Yeah.
goes. So that's my favorite method. That's my favorite tip, trick, whatever you want to call it, to
Yeah.
just instantly resetting your entire nervous system, provided it's not something serious.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, how do you approach teaching meditation, for example, to beginners who's never ever had any experience with that?
This is such a fantastic question because I get asked it all the time. And
Mhm.
honestly, my response to that is start wherever you are. Doesn't matter. Like if you've never done like a traditional meditation practice, that's okay. Start wherever you are. Whatever allows you to find some peace, some clarity, some stillness, something that is just going to take you out of your routine for just a few minutes, even if it is just a few seconds, just to take that step back and be the observer. That's where we can start. And meditation, like contrary to what's often put out there, there's different ways to meditate, and it's going to be different for different people in terms of what allows them to settle. Some people need to be moving, right? Some people need to be completely still just to get started, right? And the main thing with a meditation practice is, what are you focusing on? How are you breathing? Okay. And are you able to just to find some clarity in whatever it is that's going through your mind? And
So,
by
what happens if someone has like a chatter
yeah,
going on? How do they quiet that down?
yeah. So it's not necessarily about quieting the mind. And that's the other
Mhm.
misconception, is meditation is not necessarily about quieting your mind. It's about observing what's going through your mind. Our brain's job is to think, right? So no matter what, if we have trained our brain to think, that's what it's going to do. That's its job. And if we have trained it to think a lot because we've got a lot of anxiety, that's typically where anxiety comes from. Your brain is in overdrive, right? So if we've
Mhm.
trained it to think a lot of thoughts all at once in such a short period of time, that's what it's going to do. So if we're telling our brain to shut up and we've got anxiety, and it's like, well, I don't want to shut up because if I don't know, if I'm not doing what I'm trained to do, what am I actually doing? Right? It's going to induce even more anxiety. So that's usually what tends to happen. Someone comes to me and says, I've got anxiety. My doctor told me that I should probably try meditation, but any meditation that I've listened to has told me to quiet my mind and I can't do that. Right. So my recommendation is okay, so if you can't tell your brain to shut up, what's your brain actually saying? Why don't you listen to it?
Right.
Why don't you listen to what it's saying? Observe what it's saying. And then when you
And
can
then let
start to,
go.
yeah, when you can
Mhm.
start to observe what it's saying, then maybe like you know how when you flip pages in a book, right? Like you open a book and you just kind of flip all those pages. If it's going super, super fast, maybe you can start to slow it down. Slow down the way that you're flipping through all of these narratives in your head. And then maybe just pick one and see if you can focus on what's being said there. Right? So it's not necessarily about getting really quiet in your mind. Sometimes that's not possible. It's about eventually bringing yourself to a place where you can get comfortable with those thoughts in your head and maybe have a conversation. You know, like, have you ever been on like a first date and you've been really, really nervous? Right? Usually it goes one of two ways. Either you're really nervous and you're a chatterbox, or you're really nervous and you don't say a word. Right?
Right.
That's sort of how I approach meditation as well. Like you're sort of dating
Mhm.
yourself, right? Are you going to just observe
Yeah.
or are you going to just not say anything? What
Right.
what's going on?
That's a good analogy. I like that actually.
Yeah,
Because I find it that with meditation, there's no such things as right or wrong.
right.
It's like you need to, because I remember when I started, I had so many questions because I didn't know. I was seeing things. There was, again, the thoughts going through my head. And I was like, was this right? Was this wrong? Oh, I didn't know. I see these colors. I don't know what they mean. And then at one point, someone basically said, just let it be.
Let it go.
Don't analyze it. Don't overthink it. Just let it be and just see it as it is
Yeah,
and then just let go. And that's what I've been doing. And yeah, it's
yeah,
just practice. And
it is.
yeah,
Really, at the end of the day, no matter what you practice, right? Whether you call it yoga, whether you call it martial arts, whether you call it whatever you call it, at the end of the day, the whole point of doing what we do is to be able to observe and make the next move. Observe and move through, right? So and it doesn't have to necessarily be strategic and like that's corporate.
mhm,
Let's leave that out in the corporate world, right? When it comes to
right,
our life, all we need to focus on is one foot in front of the other. We keep going, right? That's it. We keep going.
right.
But we also want to keep going at a pace that's enjoyable, that's going to allow us to really find the joy that our life is meant to have and the peace that's basically it's our birthright to live a peaceful life,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
how do we do that? Instead of inducing more and more stress about I'm doing all this wrong or I don't know what I'm doing, which who are we kidding is most of us, right? um, but instead of doing that, if we just simply focus on what am I feeling, what am I seeing, and how do I move through it? How do I let it
Mhm.
go? Is it really important in this moment? Is it a tragedy or is it just an inconvenience? When we start to look at it that way, it's really not that big a deal anymore. Most things.
That's beautifully said. It's so important. Yeah.
Hmm.
So in your opinion, what is the most common misconception people have about not yoga, but maybe meditation, let's say?
That we all have our shit together and it's a lie.
Ah. That we're all walking gurus, right?
Oh my gosh. The most common misconception is that, well, someone who meditates a lot is probably going to be very calm or has all their shit together or, they really know what
Right.
they're doing. And honestly, nobody
No
does.
one's perfect.
Nobody does.
No one's perfect. We just try to, as you said earlier, we just try our best and be aware and conscious of these things. And
Exactly.
like you said, take that action, either it's bad or good, or I mean, I don't think there is good or bad. I think it's just making these choices in life, um, that that is so important. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Are there any specific poses, or meditation techniques that you find particularly effective? For example, reducing stress and anxiety, because as we know, we live in this society still that is so fast paced.
Yeah.
So if there's anything that you could share with us, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. So I have a couple of my go-to sort of poses, positions, flows, if you will. But there's
Mhm.
two specific things that I want to mention before I do that, though. The first thing is to immediately feel your stress levels go down. Get outside, maybe not in the snow, or maybe even in the snow if you can tolerate it. But grounding yourself barefoot outside, get outside as much as possible. That is just my first like big tip is just get outside. If you're starting to feel as though, things are really overwhelming, you're incredibly stressed out, just you can't seem to like the end it just feels like it's way out of reach in terms of like there's so much to do all the time. Get outside. Give yourself,
Mm.
10 minutes minimum 10 minutes, get outside, stand there. If you can't walk, just stand there, breathe fresh air. That's the best thing that you can do for yourself. In terms of a pose or like a specific set of poses, again, this is going to be different for different people depending on how their body moves, right? So for me, I really enjoy something like child's pose. I enjoy shavasana, like most most teachers do. I really enjoy shavasana. I enjoy malasana, which is a squat pose, like the yogi squat. And I find that just helps me to get grounded, but it also allows me to breathe in the way that I need to breathe because my body is able to move in that way. Now, if you're someone who finds child's pose to be very difficult or hard on the knees, this is not going to be, it's not going to have the same effect on you because you're going to be in pain, right? So, in terms of specific poses, I usually hesitate to say, this is the one pose that will help you with, whatever it is you're feeling. It's about finding how you feel in those poses, experimenting with different ones to see what gives you the desired effect. Now, from an energetic perspective, something like a child's pose is very grounding because your forehead is down on the ground, your knees are down on the ground, your hips are close to the ground. And because you have space in between the legs there for your belly to hang, you can take full breaths. So you have this like massive sort of trifecta, if you will. You're able to breathe. Your body is in a position where you're not fully exposed, like your heart isn't exposed, and you're able to put your forehead, so your third eye, your just this part here is very very grounding. You're able to get some pressure there. This trifecta of a calming effect. Okay, so if you can do that and if that works for you, fantastic. If that doesn't quite work, there's ways around it. Find something else. Just find another position where you're able to do the same thing. If that means laying on
Mm.
your side with your knees in the fetal position, for example, that sometimes has incredible effects too.
Yeah, and the breathing part of it too. I think you just mentioned it too, right? Fill up
That's right.
that belly and then just
Yeah.
release it. Because I
Yeah.
find it once you do that, then when you go, it
Yeah.
releases everything. Just the
Absolutely.
whole energy kind of leaves your body, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And we start to
Oh,
realize like
wow.
what we're carrying that's not our own either.
Yeah.
Right. When we start to really breathe and like we start to notice the thoughts and the patterns in our head, and when we start to question some of those as well, we start to realize we're carrying a lot of what's not ours. And when we start to let that go and we peel back those layers, again, this is part of why I love yoga so much and why I teach yoga the way that I teach it is a lot of introspection. Like, what narrative am I holding on to that's not mine? And
Right.
the practice of yoga and looking at it through that, philosophy perspective, the ethics perspective, and the principles perspective, we start to realize, oh, okay, well, that voice is actually my mother's voice. That voice is actually my uncle's
Mm.
voice. That voice is something that's come way back. It's a cultural thing. It's not
You're
actually
right.
mine. And so when we start to peel away those layers and get to the core of who we are, which is the meditation practice, which is the point of a meditation practice mostly, we start to peel away those layers and get to the core of who we are, that's where we start to find peace. Getting to know ourselves so well that nothing anyone else says will surprise us. And when we get there, that's peace.
Wow, that was beautiful. You are so right. Because we, as children, I believe is up to age 7, we absorb so much, right? And then it's like we live with our parents. We are surrounded by friends and family, and all these messages are being basically passed on to us.
Yes,
And then we are the ones who have to be like, that's it, gotta break that. Because if not, we find ourselves again repeating the same patterns like our parents or our grandparents or whatever, right? So it's like,
absolutely.
okay, we gotta put that stop to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So can you tell me about the connection between mindfulness and yoga, and how do they intertwine together?
Again, fantastic question. Um, Being mindful in our practices is yoga. So, like, I simply put, instead of trying to define yoga as the many, many things that it is, the way I like to describe yoga is that it is doing anything with intention, right? Being really, so it's being mindful of the actions that we are taking along with the consequences that could potentially arise from that, and then choosing to go through one way or the other. So doing anything with intention, being present is the key part. So that mindfulness piece really speaks to being present, right? So as long as we are, for example, you and I right now, we're carrying on a conversation, but I'm not thinking about, okay, what's she going to ask me next, and how am I going to respond? I am here waiting for whatever you might want to ask, and you're listening to how I'm responding, and we're able to have that conversation. That's yoga. When you enjoy a cup of cha in the morning, or coffee or whatever, one of those things, right? When
Yeah,
you're actually sitting there with that cup of coffee in your hand, and you can smell the coffee and you can feel how warm it is in your hands, and you're really enjoying that moment, that's yoga. When you're out for a walk, if you've got, a dog, or you've got, something that needs to be walked, or a horse, right?
right,
You're out
right.
with them. You're not thinking necessarily about what's to come, or things down the line.
Mhm.
You're there with them, right? So if you're able to do that, if you're able to be fully present and aware of what's going on around you, and you're aware of just the impact that you're having on that moment, that's yoga.
Mm.
That in a nutshell, doing anything with intention is yoga. So how does it feed into the mindfulness? I'd say they're one and the same.
Very, very nice. I Again, I agree with it. I My first book that I got when I stepped into my awakening process was Edgar Tolle,
Yeah.
and just one of the best books I think I've read for me.
Mhm.
Because again, I find again, I'm talking about myself,
Yeah.
and I used to live a lot in the present, or sorry, in the past or in the future, but I was never here because I was always busy, or I was reminiscing about the past. Oh man, I love what happened there and I want to be there, and it's like I felt being stuck. And when
Yes.
that book came along and I read that, it was literally such an eye opener for me
It's
to, I mean, it pulls us all the time, right? Because we're human beings. So it pulls you, it's your memory, right? So you live that in the past, and then you live because you want this and you want to be in the future. And once I get there, it's like being conscious again, be like, hey, no, 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 come back here
yeah.
because you're here right now. So, like you said, we having a conversation right now, and I'm not thinking about, oh, what I'm going to have for dinner. What am I cooking right now?
Exactly.
So I'm here, we're here. So it's like, yeah, we have to remind ourselves, being conscious is so important to get to the next stage of
Yeah,
our lives.
absolutely. And this is all we have, right? Like, if you want to get really out there with it and really
Mm,
philosophical with it, tomorrow is not guaranteed. The next moment is not guaranteed. We
right.
live our life in between our breaths. So what we have right now, what we have in this breath, that's all it is. That's the only thing
Yeah,
we can control. So why not make it something good?
yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing. This is it's so important. So important for all of us. Yeah. So, question for you about your book.
Oh my gosh. Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm super congratulations. I'm super, super happy for you.
Thank you
Please
so
share
much.
with the audience.
Oh
Yes,
my
we'd love
gosh.
to
Thank
hear
you
more
so much.
about it.
It was such a fun, quirky little passion project for me. It was something that I'm going to say came about so randomly. I used to run, I still do run cooking workshops. I run samosa making workshops here in the east end of town. And when I first started running them, I had a friend who'd say to me, you really should just write this down and you should do a cookbook. Like anything I've had of yours has always been just so good. You really should write a cookbook. And I sort of tucked it away in the back of my head and didn't think anything of it. And then fast forward to, last year when I was like, I'm feeling like I just want to do something fun and creative. And this could be fun and creative, and I put it together. I love photography as well, so I was able to take some photos, and I was able to, take pictures of the process and just have some fun with it, and put something together that aligns with my values as much fun as it was. So it's 20 recipes in like 20 minutes. So if you're someone who hates meal prepping, for example, but wants fresh food, this is fantastic. It's Punjabi inspired cuisine. These are recipes that I make on the daily, like very, very easy once you get the hang of, where the spices are in your kitchen. We cook with spices, so you can start to get over that fear of, flavorful food, if that's ever
Yeah.
been the case. And I try to make it as easy as possible. And I really do believe in not wasting food. So, and wasting, spices even, because I had someone say to
Mhm.
me the other day, they don't sell like small boxes of, I think it was like fenugreek or stuff like that. And I don't want to buy this thing if I'm only going to use it once. And I said, listen, if you go through the entire book, it shows up in every single recipe. It's just different quantities. So no waste in that way. And I can guarantee it's going to taste really good. So that being said,
And you're learning something new, right? Because these
yeah,
spices are kind of interesting. So, like, if you're cooking something else, why don't you add a little bit these spices to your other cookings and kind of change
exactly.
that flavor, right?
Exactly. So, it's a lot of exploring, experimenting, but in a way that, you really can't mess it up. So that was the intention behind the book. And so yeah, it was published on Amazon and it still lives there for now. And I really hope, like, if anybody who's listening wants a copy of it, I will even sign it. I will even sign it for
Yay!
you. It's so fun, and I had so much fun putting it together.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Oh, I just love this kind of food. So I'll come eat that kind of food at your place anytime.
Anytime, anytime. Seriously, come over. The door is always open.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm gonna have to have my hands on that book for sure. So yeah,
I'll send you a
wonderful. So thank you so much for all your input. I really appreciate you coming on. Is there a final word you would like to share with the audience?
I can I talk a little bit about like yoga teacher training and a retreat that I'm running right now?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
the main thing I wanted to say here is if any of these topics resonated with you, or if you do want to take on a bit more of a BIPOC inspired approach to yoga, a traditional approach to yoga, that's what my trainings are all about. So I do run teacher training twice a year. I'm running one in March of this year. It goes from March to June. And then I'm actually doing a retreat in Belize. And the retreat in Belize is it's going to take place. There's a couple of different options. I'm doing a teacher training there for a full month, but there's a 2-week retreat in there as well, if that's something that appeals to you. And these types of conversations are what I really pride myself on being able to facilitate as well. So if this is something that appeals to you, you can always reach out to me at any time. Um, yogawithjess.com is where you'll find me. This is where I live most of the time. But yeah, it's my approach to yoga and my wish for anyone who wants to take this on as a practice and start incorporating it into their life is just slow down and you will level up on your own.
Yeah, thank you, Jess. Thank you so much. We'll definitely attach everything what you just said at the end of the podcast so people can reach you. Yeah, all the information will be there. So
Sweet.
thank you so much. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it having a wonderful conversation. And I'm looking forward to connecting with you next time.
Sounds good. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate you and I appreciate being on here today.
Thank you.